Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good day to everybody. Okay, let's continue with the third part of the software testing slides lecture. Alright, in the second part we have covered on development testing. Okay, and now we'll proceed with test-driven development, which is also an extension of the content related to development testing. And then we take a look at what is release testing. Okay, the next parts of the video will cover on user testing and also testing principles. Okay, test-driven development. Okay, look at the term. Let's look at the term development. Okay, so this is test-driven development. Okay, the short name for this is TDD, right? It is actually an approach to program development. Okay, it is part of the program development. So when you are building or studying to do the coding, so you can actually apply this approach, okay, which is called TDD, which interleave testing and code development. So what it means is that, so when you do coding, you start doing your coding part, you also do the testing. So it is done interchangeably. Right, but in TDD, what is done, the test case are written first. Okay, tests are written before you write the code. And then passing the test is the critical driver of the development. So rather than begin your development with writing the coding, you start it with writing the test first. Okay, so you develop code incrementally. So you start building up the code along with a test for that increment. Okay, you don't move on to the next increment of the code until you pass the test. Okay, so it is done hand in hand. Okay, testing first and then coding and code, and then when it's running well and the test is also passed, then you keep on incrementing the code. Okay, so TDD was introduced part of agile methods. Remember when we learned about process model, we come across with agile methods, and one of it is called extreme programming. So TDD is being introduced in extreme programming, and not only that it can be used in extreme programming, but it can also be used in any other plan-driven development processes. So it can be used also outside of extreme programming, where the development is actually being planned. Okay, graphically it looks like this, right? So let's say during the development we identify a new functionality, and then from the requirement where new functionality has been identified, the test case are being written. And then you run the test, of course, because you have not done the test, the coding part for that new functionality. When you run the test, of course, it will be failed, right? So what will happen when it's failed? Then you will start adding the functionality and do refactor, or it is called refactoring. Okay, in agile method, there is a practice which is called refactoring, where basically this is a process where the programmer will keep on updating the code. Okay, if they will start reorganizing the class hierarchy. Okay, it doesn't, when you do this the development, it's not just by running the code and it works well and then you stop and then move on to another functionality. It does not work that way in agile, where on top of doing functionality, developing the functionality, there will be a team of refactoring, or maybe the developer themselves that will remove duplicate codes. Okay, sometimes when you are doing coding in a hurry, maybe there are some codes which you have duplicated before and then realize you don't use it anymore when you add new functionality, and then maybe the way that you give names to the attributes and methods is not very meaningful. You keep on updating it, and then if you need to reorganize the classes hierarchy, you go and do it. Okay, so not only that you implement the code, you also improve the quality of the code. Okay, this is done uh, in every cycle whenever a new functionality has been added. Okay, let's say you have updated the code and then you run the test again together with the new test cases that is for that new functionality. Okay, it's failed, keep on going, and if it's passed, then you keep on updating the functionality. So that is what the TDD is all about. Okay, right. Story that I have covered uh, by showing the diagram just now. So what's the benefit of doing test-driven development? The first benefit is code coverage. Okay, in testing, the way to measure the quality of the test case is actually through code coding. Okay, so what it means is that for every code segment, parts of the code that you have written, normally it will be associated with a test. Okay, because you in TDD, whenever there is a new functionality, you will come up with a test. So so it will be matching one function, one test case, the minimum. Okay. So other benefits is related to regression testing. Okay, regression testing is a kind of test where um, as you keep on adding the code, you keep on testing it. Okay, so every cycle of testing, you test the existing code and with the new added code. So that is called regression testing. Okay, so the third benefit is simplified debugging. So why this is the debugging has been simplified, because I try to identify any error in a small cycle. So you are able to identify any parts which is might be failing, okay, um, in every cycle. So it's easily to find the defect. And thirdly is in terms of the system documentation. So the test cases that you have written in every increment of functionality is actually the documentation by itself. Okay, just now we come across with a term called regression testing. So coming back to that definition, so it is a testing of the system to check that changes that you have just added have not broken previously code working. Let's say before this we have some coding parts of the codes running, and then you add new functionality, and then when you add it there to the existing one, we want to make sure that it runs smoothly. No cause of failure happen. Okay, so normally this is done using automated testing, because you need to do it again and again and again, right? So if you do it manually, it will take you some time. So that's why we are using, not most of the time when we do regression testing, we are using automated testing. Remember, I've mentioned to you about JUnit just now. So it allows automated testing of unit testing to be done very smoothly. Okay, test must run successfully before the change is committed. Okay, so let's say you have added something to the code, you must run the regression testing, or the test should pass before uh, you you continue to the next um, increment. Okay, all right. So just now we have looked at TDD, which is a kind of I can say it is can be considered as a process model, which is being applied, uh, one of the approach in test model that is applied in agile software development methodology. Okay, and now let's us look at the second stage of testing, which is release testing. Okay, in the previous video, we have take a look at development testing. So this is testing done when the system is already ready. Okay, release testing is a process of testing a particular release of the system. Okay, so the system is already complete, and that is intended for use outside of the development team. So this kind of testing is done not by the development team, but outside of the development team. Okay, the primary goal of release testing is to convince the supplier of the system that it is good enough for use. Okay, because remember that right now the system is ready, and then you want to show it to your customer or to those who might be using it that this system is good enough to be used. Okay, so release testing has to show that the system delivers its specified functionality. It might show that all the functionality agreed before starting off the development of software is there in the system. So it must have good performance and certain aspect of this dependability. If you still remember, dependability in this defined by Ian Somerville refers to reliability, okay, availability, and that it does not fail during normal use. So that's the purpose of release testing. Okay, so you want to show that the system is fit enough to be used, right? Having all the functionality, and it should be behaving in the correct manner under normal condition. Right. Sometimes release testing is also being called black box testing. Some of you might have heard about that before, and all the test cases are normally derived from the system specification. Remember that in requirement engineering, one of the job is to identify the functional and non-functional requirement, right? So during release testing, you are actually using that documentation to help you to derive the test. And sometimes release testing is being called functional testing. So during release testing, the kind of testing that you do is mainly on the functionality. You don't ask the tester for release testing to check what is inside the code. Ask them to check what kind of how do they write the code inside in terms of the use of if else statement inside there. So you don't want to know about that during release testing. Release testing is called black box because you look at the system just through its functionality. You don't want to look how the software has been written in terms of the structure and all those. Okay, release testing is a form of system testing. Okay, so release testing is done on complete system. So it is a form of system testing. So these are the differences between release testing and system testing. Okay, so they are almost the same with some minor differences. Right, a separate team that has not been involved in system development should be responsible for the release team. Maybe during, if this company or software development company is big enough, maybe they have several tester. The tester which does not involve with system testing, which is done normally by the developer, will be in charge with the release testing. So those who will perform release testing should have not been testing the system before. Okay, or okay, that's one difference. The other one is system testing by the development team should focus on discovering the defects. Okay, so that's the purpose of system testing, if you still remember, right, in the previous code, when we learn about development testing. So the purpose for system testing is to identify the defect. The objective of release testing is to check that the system meets its requirement. Okay, so at this point of time, it's more related on is the system meeting or having all the requirements? Is it good enough for external use? Okay, so in other terms, release testing is to do validation testing. Remember, validation testing is more on checking whether the requirements are right, whether the user feels uh, that the system is useful for them or good enough for them. Okay, right. One way of performing release testing is this is one of the approaches, which is requirement based testing, right? This is very related to what you have did in your project, when you have to identify your list of requirement and non-functional requirement, right? So we'll be using that requirement for the purpose of testing. So this will involve examining each requirement that you have identified and develop a test or tests for it, tests for it. Okay, so based on the requirement that you have, you will start to develop test cases. Okay, let's look at an example. So referring to our mental care system again, so there are actually many requirements, but in this slide is showing only one or two. So let me just read it through. Okay, let's say if a patient is known for certain allergy on certain particular medication or certain medicine, then the prescription of the medicine through the system shall show a warning message that is shown to the system user. Okay, so the person in charge to issue the medicine, knowing that the patient has some allergy, okay, so the system will show a warning to that the person in charge, so that that medication is not given to that patient. Okay, if a prescriber chooses to ignore, let's say the person in charge, which is called prescriber, choose to ignore that warning, so he or she need to provide some reason, okay, why they want to ignore it. So this is some description about the requirement. Okay, so given the requirement, so using requirement based testing, so we'll be using it to generate test cases, right? So based on that description just now related to the requirement on the allergy, so we can write several sets of test cases. Okay, so what so let's read the first one. So this is one way of writing the test cases specifically for that requirement. All right, so what they will do for the test cases, that they will set up a patient record with no known allergy. Let's say we identified a set of patient that they do not specify any allergy, and then prescribe medication for allergy that are known to exist. So let's say they know that there are some medicine with some allergy, right? So they just give it, assign the medicine that they know what will that will contribute to certain allergy, and then they will check whether the system check and then they will check that a warning message is not issued. Okay, so this is one way of way to test it. Okay, so this is patient that are not given any allergy information. Okay, secondly, you can set the system, you can test the system where you put in a patient record that you know the type of allergy. So this record for patient is coming together with the information about the allergy of that patient. And then you prescribe the medicine that the patient is allergic to. So you know that the patient is allergic to something, and then you assign a medicine that that person will be allergic to. And then we want to make sure that the system should raise some warning. Okay, that's the second way of testing it. And there are more, maybe you can read it by yourself, but for I just go to the third one. And there is another way that you identify a record of a patient that have more than 2 or more allergy. Okay, so these are person who is easily triggered by allergy. Okay, you know that in advance, and then you prescribe the drugs separately, the medicine specifically, and then you check whether does the system produce you the correct warning for each of the drug that the person is allergic to. So this is testing for more than one allergy, and so on. Okay, So that is what requirement-based testing is. They use the requirement, and from that requirement they come up with all sorts of data, test data, that can be used to trigger the error, okay, or any faults or um, incorrect responses, okay. So it can also be triggered using scenario based testing. So that one just now is requirement based testing, right? So they have already identified the requirement. This one is called scenario based testing, where the scenario is written like a story, okay. So this story is like starting from A to Z for that kind of, for one particular user. Okay, so this is actually a story or a scenario for a nurse. Okay, a nurse called George. Okay, who is specializes mental health care, the system that we are looking at. So one of his responsibility is to visit patient at home, check that the treatment is effective and that they are not suffering from any medical side effect. This nurse will go to the patient house and will check whether the medicine is okay and the treatment is actually being followed. Okay, on a day for the home visit, George logged into the system and use it to print his schedule. So he need to know which home he need to go to, along with the summary information about the patient that he's going to visit. Okay, because he need to study first, right, before going. At least he's more prepared. He requests that the record of this patient to be downloaded to his laptop. He is prompted for key phrases, so he need to key in some sort of security password for encryption. So this system is very secure, so meaning that not everybody can download and upload it. It need to go through an encryption system. Okay, once of the patient that he visit is Jim. So because he has downloaded the information, so he know who he's going to visit. So he has a patient named Jim who he's been treated with a medication for depression. Okay, Jim feels that the medication is helping him, but believe that it has side effects of keeping him awake at night. Okay, so he read the message, uh, and then he go and see Jim, and then he is identifying that is being the complaint uh, made by his patient. Okay, George look up Jim's record and is prompted for his key paste. Okay, when he goes to the patient house, whenever he want to log into the system, key in something, he need to put some security code. Okay, the system will decrypt the record. Okay, so it's a very secure kind of system. He checks the drug prescribed and queries its side effect. Okay, so he's retrieving the information about the medication of his patient, and then from there he knows that, oh, okay, sleeplessness is a side effect of the medication taken by Jim, and suggests that Jim visits the clinic to have his medication changed. Okay, he suggests that Jim come to the clinic and change his medicine. Okay, Jim agrees to George agrees. So George enters a prompt to call him when he gets back to clinic to make an appointment with a physician. So there is a mechanism for making appointment. Okay, George ends the consultation and the system re-encrypt Jim's record. So after he's going back, and then he need to re-encrypt. So Jim's record will be re-encrypted so that nobody who is not authorized can see Jim's record. Okay, after finishing his consultation, George returned to clinic, upload the record of patient visited to the database of the system. The system generates a call list for George of those patients who he has to contact for follow-up. So this is making appointment for the patient that he has visited. Okay, so this is scenario testing. It's like a story from A to Z for one particular person. Okay, so this is more comprehensive. We get the entire story, whereas by from requirement-based testing, it's very specific for one requirement. Okay, so based on that story just now, the scenario, you can come up with identifying the features. Okay, features 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and from there you can generate the test cases, or the tester can perform the same action as what is being listed down in the features. So among the features identified from the scenario that we have read just now, authentication by login, upload and downloading of specified patient records to the laptop, okay, home visit scheduling, okay, you know what patient to visit to, encryption and decryption of patient records on mobile devices, okay, because when he move around to one patient house to another, he need to open and close the record, so there's an encryption and decryption happening. Record any retrieval and modification of data, links the drugs database with the side effects, and system for call from thing. So these are the requirement of features that have been extracted from the scenario just now. So you can actually use it to, the tester can use that features to test the system and even write test cases specifically for that features. Okay, you mentioned just now when we do release testing, we have to ensure that the system actually meet all the requirements. That's why we can use either scenario-based testing or requirement-based testing. And on top of that, we can also check for the system performance. Okay, so part of the release testing can involve testing the emergent properties of the system, such as performance and reliability. Okay, so you want to make sure that the system is not too slow and it is reliable, it does not go down, went down all the time, right? So the test should reflect the profile of use. So we want to know, when we do performance testing, we want to know who are the users and their profile, right? Sometimes there are users that only access the system during peak time, maybe from 8 to 10. The system are being used by the user in a very they are consistently be used. Okay, there are some user who only use it maybe at the end of the day, because maybe that is the manager that will download the data and see the summary of everything, or maybe there are users that only work at night. Okay, so based on the kind of user, they will come up with a profile. So from there, they will identify the performance testing. Okay, performance testing usually involve planning a series of tests. Okay, where the load is steadily increased. So you want to see how good the system is running at normal situation, and then you keep on increasing the load. Okay, maybe the load can be in terms of adding more user. All right, maybe first time maybe 10 people only using the same function, and then keep on increasing it, okay, until the system performance becomes unacceptable. Okay, we want to see to what extent the system will about to crash, or maybe the processing becoming more slower than before. Okay, so that's related to performing testing. You want to see how well the system behave, okay, during normal condition, and we keep on adding the load. So there's another kind of similar like a performance testing, but it is being called stress testing. Okay, stress testing is actually a type of performance testing, but you are deliberately overloaded the system. You are purposely doing it to crash the system. You want to see to what extent the system can support the load. Okay, so you know that the system can normally support at one point of time maybe 1000 user, but stress test will go more than 1000 user, maybe 2000 user, 3000 users, and so on and on, and it will see at what point of time the system will crash. So stress testing and performance testing are almost the same. It's just that stress testing is, the purpose is to make the system to crash. Performance testing is more like looking at the how the system behave in normal condition, but they still attempts to raise the load, but not to see that it is crash. Okay, to recap what we have covered so far, we have looked at TDD, test driven development, which is to test first. All right, the focus is to write the test case first. Once you know what are being added to the system, what are the functionality of the system that have been added, you write the test case first, and then you run the test of course it will fail because the new functionality is not being added yet, and after that you keep on adding to the code and doing the refactoring at the same time, then run the test again until it pass, alright, before it move on to the next increment of the functionality. And then we look at the second stages of testing, which is release testing, which is done on system which is already ready. Sometimes you can also use so it's sometimes it is being called black box testing or functionality testing. Okay, this is actually referring to release testing, and there are actually many approaches, but the approaches covered under release testing, this slide is requirement-based testing and also scenario-based testing, because the purpose is to ensure that the system actually meets the requirement. So one way of capturing this requirement is through requirement checklist and also scenario. Okay, so when you are doing scenario testing, you are basically identifying the stories, okay, which is being captured, the requirement are being captured in the form of stories, where you can actually identify what are the features, and then from there you can write the test cases. And during release testing, you can also perform performance and also release testing. Okay, so and this is to ensure that the system is good enough for external use. Okay, it does not crash without during normal load. Okay, and then we want to see that during normal load, and as you go increasing it steadily, the system does not crash. Right, thank you.